It's time to talk with Senator Susan Collins. Good morning, Senator Collins.
Good morning. Great to join you today, and thank you for staying on the air and continuing to give your listeners information, hope, and comfort during this difficult time.
Well, I think you're about to do the same here. That's one of the reasons we wanted to speak with you, Senator. And the resilience of people in this state really tested here, and it was tested again this past weekend with thousands of people losing power for, in some cases, several days after investing a lot of their remaining paychecks into perishable groceries for the stay-at-home order. What kind of assurance can you offer to these folks, despite what's being reported, the negative stuff on the news, that the elected officials are prioritizing relief for these families?
Well, I think if you look at the three major bills that the Congress passed, that you see that is very evident. First of all, we addressed, as was appropriate, the health care concerns of people by authorizing free testing for the virus and also providing funding in excess of $100 billion for our hospitals and healthcare providers. That's just two areas in the healthcare arena. Perhaps most important, there is literally billions of dollars for research for a vaccine, which ultimately is the answer, and also for better testing. That is really important as well. And then I was very involved in drafting a package of reforms and programs to help prevent the economic devastation. And most important on that, in that area, is the Paycheck Protection Program, which I authored with Senator Marco Rubio, Jeanne Shaheen, and Ben Cardin. And this is a forgivable loan program that more than 16,000 small businesses in our state have taken advantage of. And the whole purpose is to allow them to continue to send paychecks to their employees, even if their employees have been laid off. Keep their health insurance in place, for example. And then the hope is that when the economy does reopen, those employees can quickly come back to work. The small business will still exist. It won't have given up and shuttered its doors forever. And we now know that we have loans in excess of $2 billion. That is an enormous amount of money to come into the state of Maine and help us get through this very difficult time. And that's just that one program, but it's a program that's been extraordinarily successful.
Those funds are desperately needed. $2 billion certainly sounds like a lot, with 98% of Maine's businesses fitting the category of small business. Small business is not just the backbone of the economy, as we keep hearing. It is almost the entirety of the economy in the state of Maine. And most of our business partners here are 50 or less employees. I mean, these are people who are really struggling, and now they're hearing that this payroll protection program, which sounded really promising, is just about tapped out. Where are we in getting additional funding?
Sadly, our attempts to get additional funding last week were thwarted on the Senate floor by the Democratic leader. I'm puzzled at that. There are other programs that I would support additional funding for, such as our hospitals, for example, but to block funding for a program that we know is running out of money. In fact, sadly, and I hate to report this, it is going to run out of money either today or tomorrow.
Yes.
We appropriated $349 billion, and the fact that that amount of money is already obligated and out the door shows how needed this program is to sustain our small businesses and their employees during this difficult time. I hope there can be a compromise reached. The Senate is going into a session today that would allow for unanimous consent requests. And the administration has asked for $250 billion additional dollars for the Paycheck Protection Program.
Yeah, we've been keeping up with these community banks. One of the stellar banks, Bangor Savings, been on with us probably 5 times, giving us updates on how many loans they're writing, how they're supporting small business through this crisis. But one of the problems is SBA. Difficult to get answers, difficult to get anyone on the line. One of our listeners on for 2.5 hours yesterday trying to get answers. Can they expand the staff? Can they provide additional?
And our community banks and our credit unions have really stepped up, are able to make approvals on their own.
Right.
They do have to get closing documents from the SBA, and I've been working with the SBA literally every day, as well as the Treasury Department, to expedite the process, because you're right, with the money running out, we're going to have some people who have been approved for loans, and yet the funding, will have run dry. And that's a terrible situation because we know the need is so great.
It is.
One other point I would make, and you are so right, that small businesses are the heart and soul of the state of Maine, and they give vitality to all of our downtowns, to our communities. But there's another point that I would make, and that is that they really care about their employees. Their employees are their family members.
They're in tears about how they're seeing these families struggle. To see these folks try to obtain unemployment benefits, which has been a challenge here. And they report these single parents who are servers and doing very well on the weekends. These Augusta and Waterville downtown businesses, restaurants in particular, doing 15 to 20% of their regular sales volume with these restrictions in place. Is there anything else going on to help them hang on?
There is. There's another SBA program that's called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, but I'm sad to report that it, too, has run out of money.
I saw that.
So those 2 programs need to be replenished. In addition, people should start seeing in their bank accounts the stimulus checks of $1,200 for an individual, $2,400 for a couple, $500 for each dependent child, and those are starting to go out right now. They are capped by income, which obviously makes sense, but if you're an individual making $75,000 or less, you get the full $1,200.
On the strategies to reopen the economy, in quotes, reopen, what can you share about the administration's approach, what we might be hearing later today?
We're going to have a conference call with the president and members of his administration later this morning, so I will know more details then. But let me tell you 2 metrics that I personally believe are necessary for us to follow based on many conversations that I've had with epidemiologists and other public health experts. One is that we need to see over a 2-week period a decline in the number of new cases. That is absolutely essential. And sadly, we're going to see an increase in deaths during that period, which breaks my heart. But when we start seeing a 2-week decline in the number of new cases, we will know that the pandemic reached its peak and is going back down. Second, we need to have more widespread testing. I'm concerned that even when schools and restaurants and gift shops and other businesses reopen, that people will be wary of going into them unless they're assured that the people working there have been tested and their tests are negative, and they themselves are going to want to know that they are negative. I talked to a business person yesterday was in contact at a board meeting with just one person who had the coronavirus, and the result was that 25 people contracted it because it is so contagious.
Yeah, and I've heard those stories too. We've interviewed a lot of doctors here, and their sentiments are the same as yours, consistent with the approach being that 2 weeks of decline is going to be the way to go. And they did have a lot of compliments for Maine citizens, saying, in one case, the doctor that joins us from Maine General, Stephen Diaz, he gives Mainers an 11 on a scale of 1 to 10 for the efforts they're putting into social distancing and all of these mitigation measures. So that's good news. That means we should be flattening that curve and be back to work as soon as possible. And
Dr. Diaz is terrific. He was on a constituent conference call that I held recently where we called out to literally thousands of Mainers, and it was so wonderful to have him. I would agree with him. It's not only that Mainers have tried to protect themselves and others, but there have been so many acts of kindness, of generosity, of people reaching out in safe ways to seniors in their communities by calling them, sending them cards, keeping in touch, and that's really important as well.
We will bring on Jim and Linda Simones, I understand, on the line with us. And good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. Nice to hear your voices this morning. I understand that you folks were successful in receiving funding through the PPP program.
Yes, we've received notification that we've been approved, and we're just waiting for the funds to come into the account.
Well, you're on the line with Senator Collins, in large part responsible for that being available to small businesses.
Good morning, Senator Collins. When we closed, it was such a hard decision, but the first thing literally that Jimmy and I did was call the senator's office to give us guidance, because this is uncharted territory for us. And
we've never closed in a 111-year history.
Jim and Linda, what's your business?
We run Simones' hot dog stand in Lewiston, Maine.
Oh, fantastic. I think I know some of your family.
Yes.
Yes, I think you do.
And I'm familiar with your product. Too familiar, perhaps. Well, Senator Collins, you heard their gratitude. And as you said, $2 billion has come into this state, and we have so much more need here. So hopefully, Senator Collins, as she works always to the best of her ability in a bipartisan way, can encourage folks on the other side to get additional funding immediately.
Jimmy and Linda inspire me to continue to work so hard toward that goal. Their business in Lewiston is legendary. I've been there many times, and they are typical of the small business owners in our state who care so deeply for their employees. They really make up the fabric of our community, and that's why it's so essential that we give them the help they need to get through this tough time.
You folks, I wish you the very best. You're in the thick of it with a lot of us trying to keep family businesses that have been around for generations alive, if not thriving, hopefully in the next few weeks here. And again, we feel you were a small business here, and we'll do whatever we can as radio partners, as media partners, to support that. Tell your story. These are real people, real issues, real threats to their livelihood, and we want to do everything we can, as I said, to keep supporting it. I know, Senator Collins, you have a limited amount of time. Is there anything you'd like to share with the thousands of citizens in central Maine as their anxiety keeps growing every day, their wealth's declining, freedoms seem to be declining, their faith may be declining in leadership? What would you like to leave folks with?
I would just remind them to have hope. We are a resilient people here in Maine. We're celebrating this year our 200th anniversary, and Mainers have always had a strong sense of community. I know that from having grown up at Caribou in northern Maine, and as a lifelong Mainer, I'm really proud of how we helped one another through crises, whether it was the ice storm of 1998 or the pandemic crisis that we're in now. We'll get through this by depending on one another and helping one another.
And I will tell you that as soon as I send an email or reach out to your staff, they're very responsive. You do listen to your constituents. Obviously, in Jim and Linda's case and others, you have responded. I think many of us still feel that you do vote your conscience and you do remain a real asset to Maine and America. So thank you for the work you do.
Thank you so much, Jay. And my thanks to Jimmy and Linda as well.